What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. We have talked at length on this channel about using ConsolePort to play with the controller, and we've also made several GNOME sequencer videos. I've made countless over the years, actually, and so I've kind of become synonymous with both of these concepts, playing WoW with the controller and playing with GNOME sequencer. And so I don't know if I've contributed to a misconception that I would like to address today, and that misconception is that in order to play WoW with the controller, you must be using GNOME sequencer. And so I wanted to address this because while I love GNOME sequencer and I think it's a great add-on for people that need it, it's not a requirement to play WoW with a controller. And this will also help people who ask what classes can be played with a controller. And the answer is that you can play any class you want to with a controller without GNOME sequencer if that's what you want to do. And that's nothing against GNOME sequencer, but I think it's very important that people understand so that they have every option at their disposal. I don't want to see people feeling like they have to use something that they don't necessarily need or want to use. The reason why I use GNOME sequencer is that for me, it serves as an accessibility tool. And the reason why is because I am visually impaired. I have very limited vision in one eye and the other eye is completely blind. So I have no peripheral vision. I'm extremely nearsighted. And so when I'm playing any class really, and several classes have cooldowns like a paladin, you're basically using several cooldown abilities, Blade of Justice, execution sentence, all these other abilities, Wake of Ashes, Judgment, they all have cooldowns, and then you have to manage your holy power and everything. It can be very hard for me with my limited vision to track all of those things and also track what's happening in the encounter as well. So it can be very challenging for me. And even using an add-on that tracks my rotation for me and tells me what to press next, there's some great add-ons out there that can help with that. Even using that, it's hard still because I'm still fixating on that add-on giving me the information. And so I'm still looking at a very specific spot on the screen, and that can be still very difficult. So using GNOME sequencer to do a rough sequence through my rotation helps out significantly, even if it does limit my skill ceiling to a certain degree. And so that's why I use GNOME sequencer. Other people, maybe they have limited mobility, so they use it because it's easier to press fewer buttons for them. And then there are, of course, people that are simply just lazy or casually playing the game at a chill pace and are not looking to min-max or play at a very high level. And that's fair. So there are plenty of valid reasons to want to use GNOME sequencer, but one of them is certainly not that you need it to play with a controller. And that's what I want to help. I want to encourage anybody who is interested in playing with a controller that you can do so out of the gate with any class without any other add-ons really if you want to. And I'm going to help you with the help of some add-ons, but also with the like if you don't want to use any add-ons outside of playing with the controller, I'm going to show you how you can do that with pretty much any class. And the thing we're going to do first is we're just going to open up my ConsolePort. Now I've done another video going over my keybinds and everything, so I'm not going to go into super detail, but I will go over some basic things. So ConsolePort has a lot of useful keybinds that you can do. You can keybind to any interface panel, any add-on command, all those sorts of things, but you obviously can also keybind to your action bar. And so the way I have it set up is that when I hold down left trigger or right trigger, that's when I access my action bars. And so by default, I have it set up to use the face buttons, the D-pad, and the left and right joystick buttons. So that's 10 buttons for each modifier held down. So when I hold down R2, I get 10 buttons. When I hold down L2, I get 10 buttons. And when I hold down both L2 and R2, I get 10 more buttons. Now, that generally seems to be enough, especially with the help of some other add-ons or with some other tricks I'm going to show you. But even if that's not enough, because there are some classes that have, believe it or not, more than 30 abilities, even for situations like that, you can get more buttons. And the way you can do that is with the third modifier. So I also have L1 as a third modifier. And as you can see, both my face buttons and my D-pads are not bound to any action bars. So that right there could give me 8 to 10 more buttons, and then you can combine L1 with the other modifiers as well. So L1 with L2, L1 with R2, and then you can do all three, L1, L2, and R2. So as you can see, with that combination, with all three combinations, and really with however you want to set up your console port, it's very customizable. You can have pretty close to as many buttons as you would ever have on a keyboard and mouse. I mean, it really is like it's negligible at that point. Technically, you could probably still get more mileage out of the keyboard and mouse in terms of sheer number and volume of hotkeys, but you get what I'm saying. You have more than enough available here with the controller, and at that point, even if it seems kind of alien to you, that's fair, because if you've been playing with the keyboard and mouse and it's working for you, why would you ever want to switch? But for those of us who like playing with the controller, it all comes down to muscle memory, and it's easily achievable, especially when you get used to just hitting the buttons and holding down the correct combination. So especially for those of us who maybe play fighting games, we're very familiar with combinations and things like that. So you can get all the buttons you need just from that alone. But there are some other things that you can do, and really this isn't even a console port specific thing, because even people that play WoW with a controller are always looking, or with a keyboard and mouse even, or a controller, are always looking for ways to consolidate their buttons. And you can do a little bit even without using GNOME Sequencer. There are a few things that you can do. So the first thing I want to go over is an add-on that can really help. And actually ConsolePort has this built in. It's called a utility ring. If you don't like ConsolePort's utility rings, you can also download an add-on called Opie, and it will allow you to create rings that look like this. And so for me, I have this bound to my controller. Opie is controller friendly, and what this does is it allows me to put anything in these rings. I can create any ring I want and put abilities or items in it. So for this ring, this is like my standard like utility ring. This has my Hearthstone, my Traveler Yak, Expedition Mac Yak, sorry, allows me to transmog and sell items. I also have my Dalaran Hearthstone, my Garrison Hearthstone as well, usually if I have my Garrison unlocked. Apparently I don't on this character. And then of course now my Switch Flight ability, and also my Warband summoning. So I have all those bound to one ring, and I can make that account wide, so every character has this keybound. I can also make character specific keybinds. Now I don't have any for paladins because I really don't have the need for it. I used to have one for seals and auras back in like classic WoW, but retail doesn't have as much of that. There are a couple of auras, but I don't really ever feel like I need to use them. I just keep devotion up. But you could do something for like your auras, your seals. If you're playing, like say you're playing a druid, you could put have one for all of your travel forms. If you play a mage, you could have one for all your portals, and your demons for your warlocks, or anything you want really. You could do one with all the traps for your hunter, or like I said, your auras for a paladin, your blessings, whatever you want to do, and then you can combine things. Really anything that you don't necessarily need to have quick access on your action bar, you can make rings for and then keybind those, and that way you're consolidating several buttons into one hotkey, and that's a very useful thing that you can do. I also have one specifically for quest items. So when I get quest items, they will appear in this ring, and you can even have one for your professions as well, though the way I access professions is through this utility ring, which comes with ConsolePort, and this is how I access pretty much all of my interface, including even the group finder and leaving and joining groups. So that even frees up even more buttons for hotkeys for the action bar, because I don't need to hotkey any of this stuff. So as you can see, you can do things like that. And so the utility rings are very effective at helping you bind and consolidate anything you want to 1 to 2 buttons. So think of things that you just don't necessarily need to have on your action bar, and it can be very helpful for you. So that's one way to consolidate buttons. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you just how I would set up my action bar, and then we'll go over some normal macros that can help you consolidate things even more. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, so like I'm going to stick with my 30 button limit. I don't feel like I want to deal with more than 30 hotkeys personally. Even if a class has more, I'm going to try to find some ways to consolidate things. So I'm not going to go above 30. Fortunately with Rep Paladin, it looks like we don't really need to go above 30, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14, 20, 4, 8, 30. So we have 30 abilities here. So I can put every one of these abilities on my action bar and be good to go with Ret Paladin. Now, obviously, there are some other classes that maybe have more than 30. So the first thing I would do is go through these and see if there's anything I don't need. Really what I think I do is I just go through and bind things as I see fit. I'd like to start with my damaging ability. So what I would recommend if you're going to keybind your stuff on your action bar and where you're going to put things is I like to stick to muscle memory. And so I try my best to keep things in the same location across every character. What I mean is, like, I have a section for my primary attacking abilities. I have a section for AoE. I have one for CC, you know, those sorts of things, buffs, healing, survivability, defense cooldowns. You get the idea. I try to have similar things across all classes in the same general area. So for me, Blade of Justice, when we tend to use a lot, I like to put it right here in front. So I'm going to put this one right there. Then we have Eternal Flame. Okay, so this is our healing ability with the build that I have. And so for this one, I like to put healing abilities on the D-pad. So I'm going to put it right there. Next up, we have Wake of Ashes. This is one we need to use fairly often, even if we're playing, you know, Herald, especially if we're playing Templar. We want to have that close by. That's Word of Glory. So here's an example of one that I don't need. Because I have Eternal Flame, I don't need Word of Glory. I would use Eternal Flame over that. So that's one we don't even need to worry about. Okay, Execution Sentence. I'm going to put that on D-pad down because it's not one that I feel like I need to use very often. Cleanse Toxins. I already have that on here, actually. And so we're just going to leave that where it is. Divine Protection. This is our not our CC. This is our survivability. I like to put that on the left trigger and on the D-pad. So I will put it D-pad down with left trigger held. So Final Verdict. This is one of our most important abilities. I'm going to put it there. So that's going to be on box. And then Divine Storm, as you can see, it's already here. I actually left these up. So this is where what I do is, so I put Final Verdict on right trigger and box. I put Divine Storm on right trigger plus left trigger and box. So that's how that's going to work. Or I guess L2, R2. You get the idea. I play with so many different controllers. And then I have a couple other abilities that kind of go along with some others that have that I don't need to use as much or have longer cooldowns for whatever it is. And I kind of have them on the L2 plus R2 as well. So I try to keep all my rotation on the face buttons as much as I can. And I prefer using R2 and then L2 and R2 for extras, maybe the D-pad for some, especially like to try to reserve L2 and R2 for AoE abilities, if that makes sense. So that's just my logic. And then of course we have another defensive cooldown, so I'll put it over here with this other one. And then we go over on this side, of course, we've got Judgment. That's important. I'm gonna put that there. Divine Steed, I actually have that included in my mount add-on. I use light mount, and you can do a lot of mount management and even movement abilities with that add-on and keybind all of that to one hotkey. So I don't even need to put that on there. Divine Toll we've got going on already, so that's cool. Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Protection, Blessing of Sacrifice. I'd probably put all of those on a utility ring now that I think about it. So I'm not going to put those on there. Flash of Light we're going to put here. I think that's right. Rebuke, I like to put that on one of my joysticks, so I'll put that there. We'll get to Redemption here soon. And then of course now we have our CC abilities, and I like to put those on the left trigger side, so I'll put that there. Blinding Light, same idea, put that there. Sense Undead, I don't think we need that. I don't even think I'd ever use it. Same with Shield of the Righteous. I'm not a tank, I don't have a shield, so that doesn't go in the action bar either. And pretty much every class you're going to have abilities like that. You're going to have abilities that you just don't need to put on your action bar. So, or you don't need to put, like you can put in the ring, or you can put far away on your action bar. So that's kind of nice. Oh. And then again, these auras, I do have Consecration and Devotion. I could probably make another ring for those and combine those together. And then of course, Hand of Reckoning. I like to use this to pull things even when I'm playing by myself. So that will go there. Forgot Lay on Hands. I like to put Lay on Hands right here. D-pad up with right trigger held down, so that's easily available if I panic. And then of course we have Divine Shield. That's another one that we can use, and I think I will put that on the other side. So left trigger and up. Okay, so there you go. There are a couple of abilities we're going to go over here in a second with macros, but yeah, so that's how I would set it up. And as you can see, I've got everything sorted on my action bar. This class as far as like damaging abilities, not including like utilities, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we have 8 damaging abilities. We don't have Crusader Strike for this build, but you know, so we could have more, we could have less, but 8's pretty high. I mean, that's decently high, and we can fit all that easily on basically one action bar, 1 to 1.5 action bars. So that's pretty cool, and that's how I have it set up. So that's how you can do it with pretty much any class without really needing an add-on like Gnome Sequencer. And then it's just a matter of muscle memory. Learn where your buttons are and then start hitting them. Like I said, if I, you know, could easily keep track of things, then maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But for me right now, I'm just trying to do the best I can. You see what I'm saying? So like it's not easy for me to play this way, especially trying to keep track of everything. So yeah, and then so that's one thing that you can do. But for those of you that can see really well, and you're able to keep track of things easier, and you can see what's going on, you don't need an add-on like Gnome Sequencer to do this. So that would really apply to any character, and there are different things that you can do, whether it's the rings, and you can also do macros to consolidate buttons even more. And this is without Gnome Sequencer, just default macros. I'm going to show you one that I've made for Retribution Paladin, if I can get out of combat eventually, and we'll just run down, and so there we go. Okay, thank you. All right, so so I want to show you a macro that I've made, and this is to combine my Resurrects. So as a Ret Paladin, I have a combat res and a standard res, so I can make a macro to consolidate them and have one button for resing. That's very useful because not only is it good muscle memory, it also consolidates my buttons. So the way I've created this is I always put show tooltip so I know which res I'm using, and then what it does is it's /cast combat in brackets intercession, that's my combat res, semicolon redemption. So the way this is laid out is the default action for this macro is redemption. The semicolon differentiates the first action from the second action. The first action has a conditional, that's the brackets, combat. So when I'm in combat, this button will switch over to intercession, and then when I'm out of combat, it'll switch to its default action, which is redemption. And that's how you would use these abilities. You wouldn't be able to use redemption when you're in combat, and you wouldn't need to use intercession when you're out of combat. So they go together really well. And you can combine abilities like that across any class for using different commands. I recommend that you acquaint yourself with macro commands, and there are plenty of resources out there you can find. Wowhead has some great stuff. I remember Wowpedia, WowWiki used to have some good stuff, and there are even subreddits, I believe, that can help with this. So there's a lot of knowledge out there, people that know how to use standard macros even better than me, but I can show you a few others, okay? So we're gonna switch to a different character now, and I'll show you some really useful ones. Okay, so now I'm actually on my Holy Priest, and yes, you can even heal with a controller. I'm going to be releasing a video very soon showing you how I do it, and I gotta tell you, if I can clumsily get through it with the controller and my vision, then you can do pretty much anything in the game, so never limit yourself. But case in point, I'm going to show you some macros that you can make that can help you make that even easier. Okay, and consolidate some of your buttons, because as a healer, you sometimes, like really with Holy Priest, you don't have that many, but you do get a little bit more going on. You have your damaging abilities, so you do have somewhat of a damaging rotation, and then of course you have your healing abilities, and you're trying to use all these together. Well, you can actually combine some of these things, and I've already done that with a couple. So we have another resurrection thing that we can look into. So as a Holy Priest, we have mass resurrection and resurrection. So let me go to my macros and I'll show you what I've made, and this seems to be working pretty well. So we'll go over here, resurrect. Okay, that's what it's called. And so what it does is it's cast help dead resurrection, and then semicolon mass resurrection. So the default action for this macro is mass resurrection. So when I don't have an enemy or when I don't have somebody targeted, it'll use mass resurrection. If I do have somebody targeted and they're dead, it will use normal resurrection. And so that way I can keybind both, or I can combine both of these into one keybind. There we go. There we go. So that's also very useful. Okay. And so another macro that I have a cast sequence macro. The reason why I have this, it's called, I call it Live Weaver. I must have been really tired when I made that. It's supposed to be Light Weaver, but either way, or Life Weaver from Overwatch. So I, as a Holy Priest, I am using the Life Weaver talent, and this allows me to use Flash Heal, and when I use Flash Heal, it will empower my next heal. So generally, the way I understand it is that you alternate between the two when you're healing. So because of that, I've created a macro that will do that for me. It's a cast sequence macro, well, called Live Weaver, I guess. It's supposed to be Life Weaver or Light Weaver. Jeez, sorry. Anyway, so what this one does, I don't normally recommend that you make cast sequence macros. There are occasions where they will work okay, but generally speaking, I don't recommend that you rely on these too much because they can be unreliable. So that's, some people might disagree with that, but that's just my experience, okay? So, but with this, because we're going to be generally alternating between the two, what I've done is I've created one. It'll reset when we enter and exit, or when we exit combat, it will reset. It'll use Flash Heal and then follow that up with Heal. So you press it once, Flash Heals, press it again, it heals, and then it will go back to Flash Heal again. So that way I can combine those two together, and then they will use they will benefit from the Life Weaver, the Light Weaver procs. So that's pretty cool. Okay, now, if you don't necessarily want to go that route, because I don't even know if that's ideal in a lot of situations, I think that there might be some experienced holy priests that wouldn't suggest doing that, but you know, my experience is very limited. But there are some other things that you can do as a holy priest, or as any class really. We'll go over this. You can use help harm macros. And like I said, there are plenty of other commands that you can benefit from as well. You've seen combat in here a lot, targeting, certain targeting styles, and different things that you can do. There are some fun pet related ones that you can do for your hunter to have like a contextual macro that will handle all your pet abilities. You can also put them on a low pi bar, but I digress. But this is a help harm macro, and I really like these ones a lot. They're very useful. So what this one does is this combines smite and flash heal. Okay, so with a harm command, if you're targeting something that you can hit with a spell or damage, then it will use the spell that it's linked to. So in this case, smite. If I don't have a target available, or I'm not targeting anything like that, then it will by default use flash heal. The alternative way to do that is the exact opposite. I can have it say cast help flash heal semicolon smite. That might even be the better way to do it. What that will do is when I have a friendly player or NPC targeted, it will use flash heal. If I don't, and I have something else targeted, it will use smite. So that's another way that you can do it. And so as you can see here, if I'm not targeting anything right now and I use this, it'll cast flash heal. Okay. And then of course, because of this, I'd have to manage, heal on a separate button. But if I have something targeted, if you look at it now, it's switched over. So look, so in there, if you look down at the icon down here, you can see it's flash heal. If I look over and target an enemy, it now switches to smite. And so that's a way that I can consolidate buttons as well. So those are a couple of really useful commands. Help and harm, you can use those to combine abilities like that. And so like if we open up our thing here, there are other ones as a holy priest that we could totally combine. So for example, holy word chastise, which is something that you do to the target, you can combine this with holy word serenity. And so this is a heal. So they both share a minute cooldown. They kind of function the same. It's just that you use one to heal and use the other one to harm. So it's kind of like, and think of it like living flame for evokers. You can basically do the same thing with other classes. And so the way I think that's probably what they did with evokers is they just made living flame function like a help and harm macro. So it's really, it seems innovative, and I guess it is in some ways, but really it's something that you've always been able to do just with different types of abilities. Another one that you could combine is like holy fire and a prayer of mending. You could do those as well. They're very similar, have really close to similar cooldowns. You're pretty much using them all the time. So that's something else that you can do. And that actually works well if you're playing an Oracle and you're using the Oracle ability. You tend to combine one of them with either of these two abilities. So those two can also go together pretty well. So that's something else that you can do. You can combine abilities through help harm with combat, different targeting commands, all kinds of things like that. So some of the limitations you're going to have with macro commands as a controller user, you won't be able to use modifier macros, so like mod, shift, controller, alt, and that's because your modifiers are programmed in ConsolePort to shift into other buttons. Okay, so ConsolePort's already using your modifiers if you bind them to, like in my case, left trigger, right trigger, left bumper. Those are using those 3 modifiers. So if I put a macro with modifier in, it's not going to work properly. That would also apply to, obviously, like as you can see, I'm not using my cursor, I'm just running around, so there's no cursor on the screen. So trying to make an at cursor or at mouse over macro may not really work that well. That's something else to remember. I think by default it puts the cursor right in the center, so you might be able to get away with some things, but in general I wouldn't recommend it because you're not going to have that control that you would normally have when you're playing with a keyboard and mouse. And I think that right there might be the biggest detractor for a lot of people that really like to rely on their mouse for targeting allies or enemies, different things like that, using an add-on like Cell. There are all kinds of benefits that you do seem to miss out on a little bit when you're playing with a controller. But at the same time, it all boils down to practice and muscle memory, and you can make any playstyle work if it's what you're wanting to go for. So always remember, it's different strokes for different folks, and it's okay for you to play the game however you want to play, but never feel like you have to do something if you don't have to do it. And while I love GNOME Sequencer, you don't need it to play with ConsolePort. If you need it, use it, but don't feel like you have to use it if you don't want to use it. And with that being said, if you want to play with the controller, you can play it with any class or spec that you want to. It all boils down to practice, keybinds, and muscle memory. So I hope this video was somewhat informative for you and encouraging that if you want to try it out, you can with any class that you want to play. So let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If it helped you out, let me know. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. With all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.